Hello, everyone. Today I'd like to talk about not this is I would like to talk about inking. I know the video I'm probably going to title it something like "How to Ink," but there's many different ways that you can go about inking, and maybe what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a whole bunch of different techniques, ways of thinking about inking, and and just maybe talk about the purpose of inking, and maybe you can pick and choose out of that, your own technique, your own way of inking, and make your own decisions. Anyway, to start with, I keep always getting asked what piece of software I use or what kind of hardware and tablets that I use. So I'll just go over that, just that way, I'll answer any questions beforehand. The software that I'm using is a program called TVP or TV Paint, TVP Animation Pro or TV Paint Animation. It is a bitmap-based animation software. It's not vector-based. This means that there is no points to pull. If I zoom right in, so here, let me switch my cameras. There we go. So if I zoom in like crazy, there we are. We're straight into the pixels. And that means that, you can't infinitely blow things up forever like you could with say, Flash or Toon Boom or Illustrator. So, I mean, that might be one of the downsides to it. But the upside to TVP Animation Pro is that it's a fantastic pixel pusher. And by that, I mean just being able to manage pixels really quickly. I'm working at 2K, 2560 by 1600. So that is the resolution of my monitor, which is currently, I'm using a Cintiq 12-inch WX. It's one of the older displays. So it's 12-inch diagonal. It's 1280 by 800, and the resolution is that I'm working at. My canvas resolution is 2560, so that's times 2, and then vertical times 2. So that's the size of my canvas. My canvas is actually pretty darn big. And this is how I get this cleanliness to my line is that working at high res, even with bitmap-based stuff, you can get a cleanliness to your lines that looks almost like vector. So if I zoom in at 100%, this is how it looks, and I have all this playground space to deal with. The other reason why I use TVP Animation Pro is that I like the customizability of its user interface. I can set up hotkeys any way I please. I have these separate layouts called rooms. I can just hit a hotkey and switch between my different rooms for my layers and whatnot. And that's the reason I like it. Is that I can. It's a very good pixel pusher. Meaning that if I ever need, say, here, let me lock the, I've got, for one thing, it's animation. So every time I need new pieces of paper, I just hit the new frame button, and then I can, number 1, go back, 2, 3, 4, and all of these are just separate frames of animation that I can just flick through, and I can roll through them really, really fast. We're working at 2K here, and this is with pixel-based raster-based stuff, similar to what you'd find with, MS Paint or Photoshop or Painter. So that's the first thing, is I use it because it's fast, it's responsive. Any of the tools that I use will be, I get immediate results out of them. I can have many drafts or pieces of paper open. I can take this, anything that I'm working on, just create a new frame and then continue working on it like this. And now it's just another frame that I can flick back and forth with. So, that's, again, one of the many reasons why TVP Animation Pro is my weapon of choice, or my drug of choice anyway. Okay, what else am I using? I'm using a Cintiq, the 12WX, which is, it's a tablet display. So, whoops, hang on just a second. Wrong display. Number 2? No, number 4? 3? There we go. Okay, so it's a tablet display, which means that it's an Intuos. It uses Intuos 3 technology, so Intuos 3 type pens will work with it. A nice thing about it is that it gives you very good hand-eye coordination, meaning that where you draw is where the line comes out, within a few millimeters. There's always a few calibration issues, some having to get used to it. And this is all very important when you're dealing with inking because you want accuracy. You want to be able to get the lines go exactly where you want. But what's nice about having a Cintiq is that it's easy to deal with angles. So if I want to draw lines that go out in various angles, it's I don't have to worry about whether or not the line is going to go exactly where I want it to. So I have better, if you have good hand-eye coordination, you can leverage that. You can make use of that. The disadvantage to the Cintiq is Well, when you're dealing with areas over here in these quadrants here and this quadrant here, the quadrants which are overlapped by your dominant hand, when you're drawing out, you can see, right, your hand becomes a moving blind spot. And so, when you move up, suddenly you can't see where you've been. So there's a lot of kind of exercises that I wind up going through in order to train being able to draw through my hand and that sort of thing. So anyway, the reason I'm talking so much about tools right now instead of just jumping right into the techniques is because I find my tools are very important. They enable me to do things. They make it possible to do things. And, it's just that way, we remove the obstacles to doing good work. And one of the obstacles is, your equipment. And then the other obstacle is, well, yourself, where you have to train yourself. So, okay. So anyway, let's see. Right. Another thing about inking that's kind of important is being able to have, well, the good hand-eye coordination. So earlier I would, one of my previous videos, or a lot of my previous videos, is I would always talk about being able to draw, straight lines in every direction, which means, being able to go out like this, right? So it doesn't matter what angle you're at. If I draw a circle, then I can always hit the line. I'm using really fat lines, so this is actually a lot easier. But, this is very important. It's just simple, straight out and out hand-eye coordination. Another thing that's important is you'll notice that I don't draw like this. The reason why is because, well, the active area that I can actually reach with my fingertips, that's the maximum range that I can reach with my fingertips, which is not even a round circle. And for that matter, you'll notice how wobbly it is because as I shift, right, all these joints are kind of wobbling around each other, and they induce a lot of wobbliness, and this does not help inking very much at all because it winds up in, well, lumpiness. It winds up with a lot of lumpiness in the line. So I just click there, you can see, right, all that lumpiness in the line, which is just not what we want. We want smoothness. And so to get smoothness, what I find helps a lot is, assuming, I don't know, find a grip that's comfortable for you, all right? But not like, the ideal grip, I think, is one that does not allow for a whole lot of wiggliness in the pen, right? So it keeps the pen stable, keeps it steady, keeps it stable, and it doesn't allow for, a whole lot of wiggliness when you wiggle this point. So you should have a good firm grip, but don't kill it, because if you kill it, if you're like gripping really hard, you're going to get like mega cramps and carpal tunnel, and that's no good. You have to be able to sustain this stuff for like 5-6 hours a day, maybe 8 hours a day. And you're in this for the long haul. If you're in this for a career, you got to be able to sustain this stuff all day. So find a good comfy grip, good and firm. In particular, mine is like this, like that, and then. The other thing I find is that there's different parts to your hand that you can use. So there's the heel of my hand. There is, the side, the blade of my hand as well that I can use. And then finally, there's these two fingers right here and even the fingernails. So the thing is, that the one thing that people kind of have trouble with when they're dealing with Cintiqs and tablets in general is the amount of skating that occurs, because this is a glass surface. It's perfectly smooth. There's very little friction. And so that means that if you're trying to draw with your fingertips, there's no friction at all. And that throws a lot of people off. It threw me off for several years, in fact. I've been using tablets since the Cintiq 18SX came out. So that was like, I was one of the early adopters. So I've been working with tablets this long, and these are some of the things that I've figured out to help me deal with it. And so what I do is I use, the blade of my hand and the heel of my hand and, these fingers to add friction. And so when I draw using my whole arm instead of my fingertips, the friction, I rely on the friction of my hand to regulate the speed and the movement and to get kind of a tactile feedback as opposed to using the tip of the pen. That does not give me any feedback whatsoever. So I don't rely on moving the tip with my fingertips. Instead, I use my arm. And this is something that you'll find, this kind of hand grip, or rather this kind of elbow and shoulder movement, is what is used a lot in animation. In animation fields, is they use this kind of thing to get large movements, large sweeping curves, and the other thing is that the mass of your hand coupled with the mass of your forearm and your elbow all the way up to your shoulder, that mass of your arm is going to absorb. It's a shock absorber. It's a heavy mass. It takes a lot of energy to accelerate and decelerate that, and so as a result, it creates very, very gradual curves. It doesn't make bumpiness. So this I find is very critical to inking. Is critical to getting those smooth lines, and you have to practice. Because this stuff, drawing I think as amateurs, we're very used to just kind of anchoring our wrist down and then drawing with these fingertips. This is very comfortable. This is very uncomfortable. Not like at first, it's very uncomfortable at first. You do more of it and more of it, and it becomes comfortable. And then, again, you're in this stuff for the long haul. You're in this for a career. So I say, get used to this as soon as possible. And, there are several different ways you can get used to it, but they all involve, a lot of just, drawing. And so, getting warmed up involves, doing a lot of these kind of circles and filling up a whole page with circles, trying to get nice round circles. And you're drawing on, both clockwise and counterclockwise to get, this kind of fluidity. So this, and the reason I'm talking so much about this is because, inking is completely directly related on how steady your arm is. You don't have a steady arm, you can't get steady inking, you can't get smooth lines. So, I'm just trying to deal with all the physical constraints right now, dealing with the problems of both your tools and yourself as a tool. I'm a tool. So anyway, get that arm really going and don't use, if you're doing big stuff, don't use these fingertips. It comes later. When you're doing the fine stuff, then it comes later. You use that. So what else? If I'm not drawing large curves, then if I need to draw small stuff, what I do is now I start to apply more friction with, other parts of my hand. And I use that. You see that? I'm still not using my fingertips, but I can use that to draw smaller and smaller things, right? I haven't even engaged my smoothing foot pedals or anything like that. But, this still allows me, or I'll use these two fingertips as well. And if I really need slidiness, then I just adjust so that I'm skating on my fingernails. But I find that's usually a little too slidey. Another thing is the way that my tablet is mounted. I'm using a Mabef, M-A-B-E-F. It's a desktop easel. I can change the inclination on it. It's got a nice big fat shelf on it. There are bigger Cintiq, 24 inches, and the much larger ones. The reason I prefer using this little 12-incher and the Mabef is, number one, this is like $1,000, whereas the other ones are like, actually it's about $900 now. Whereas the easels are like less than $100. They're actually, I think, $50 for the easel, as opposed to paying $2,000 for the much larger one. And quite frankly, I find I don't need that much scale and space, because if the other thing I was mentioning about TV Paint having customizable user interfaces, right? I like this because I can make use of a small monitor like this. I can just press a button down, release it, and all that stuff goes away. If anything I don't need, I can just get it out of the way. This is all canvas space. This is all drawing space. Push a button down, I can do my stuff, get rid of it. So, customize your user interface. I believe Photoshop, if you're going to use Photoshop for inking, then by all means, I know that Photoshop has different customizable user interfaces where you can hit the tab key to make these windows appear and disappear. You want canvas space, all right? You don't want to have palettes and stuff. You want to have a few tools that you're going to use for inking, and then you don't want to be messing around with layers. You don't want to be messing around with all these little doodads and gewgaws. Get that stuff out of the way. All right, let's see what else do I want to talk about. Smoothing. All right, if you want to get, there's things like line smoothing. You see this? There's a bit of lag between the stylus and where my pen is, right? That is smoothing. TV Paint has a built-in smoothing engine. Paint Tool Psi has a very good smoothing engine. You might want to look into that even for inking. I really like Paint Tool Psi's smoothing engine. In my case, I'm using, I hacked my Wacom driver. People ask me how I do it, and well, to be frank, I've been programming computers since I was in high school and junior high. I'm stubbing a DLL and doing other wacky stuff, and I've even rigged the whole thing up on foot pedals so I can adjust how much smoothing there is. All right, so I can say I want lots of smoothing, or I can turn off the smoothing altogether, and it becomes really fast. But I think for other people who don't have these things, you're going to have to wait until Wacom develops something like this, or use a program like Paint Tool Psi or TVP Animation Pro, which allows you to have adjustable smoothing. And even then, when you have a smoothing engine, what it's doing is it's slowing down the pen, so it's not moving exactly where you want. It's simply getting rid of a lot of the little wiggles and bumps. And so even then, there is some training time that's required to kind of get used to it. So when you're using a smoothing engine, let's just talk a bit about inking with smoothing engines. You have to be able to work out how to get your lines to stop on precise locations. Now with TVP Animation Pro, the nice thing is that we have a little toggle where I can turn off something called drying. So if I just let me switch back to my camera here. So okay, so with drying in TVP Animation Pro, if I right-click, which means if I use the little button on the stylus, the side switch on the stylus, it keeps me on the same tool, but it means that wherever I draw on top of it, it's going to erase. Well, that's not the drawing. That's actually with all tools. But what's special about drawing is if I say switch to a tool like this, okay, and then let me grab a color like, there we are. Okay, so if I pick a color like this and my drawing is off, okay, and I switch to another color like this, when I right-click to erase, it only erases the last color choice. So it only erases, the brush strokes for that particular thing. So it's like a temporary layer. So if I put, stuff down like this, right, we have a temporary layer that I can erase away, and it brings back the stuff. If I change colors, then if I right-click, it erases only that temporary layer. The moment I change colors, or I undo and redo, or I switch brushes, then it will dry the layer, and I can no longer use the right mouse, the stylus side switch to erase. With drawing on, however, it just simply obliterates everything underneath it. And here's where this is useful for inkers. If I, say, get my line out like this, okay, so I can draw a line like this, and let's say I need to make a line stop right there, just like that. In fact, you know what? I'm going to use a really, really fat line just to demonstrate this. Okay, so I need my line to stop right at that little intersection. So what to do? Well, with drawing, I can right-click to erase. And if I right-click to erase, whoops, let me turn the drawing off. There. If I right-click to erase, you see that? It leaves behind the previous one. So if I simply draw my stroke, zoom right in, get right into the pixels, I can, very carefully, aha, that wasn't so good. It's tough because I'm using such a giant brush, and I should probably, let's just stick with it. Okay. I can just right-click to erase, and then just slowly squeeze up to it. Got it. Okay, there. And now it leaves behind the other pixels from the other line, right, to do that. Normally, you wouldn't have such a thin line ramming into such a really thick line, but that's just sort of a demonstration of, how this can work out for you. So really, really nice to have the drawing function. Makes inking a whole lot easier. All right, so I talked about tools. I talked about training yourself. Don't be surprised if this stuff takes you weeks, of intensive just eating, breathing, doing nothing but those exercises to get good at it. And then the other thing about inking is the way in which I ink is there's a lot of very specific techniques. Basically, I guess, whenever you look at any of my techniques, it's kind of like an iceberg. You're only seeing the tip of it, but there's a great deal more underneath, or it's like an onion. There's many layers to what I do. So, okay, number one, I did this little kind of blobby doodle, and I inked it. And one of the things I do is what I use. For me, the purpose of inking. Is to make things more readable. Make it so that you can tell what their forms are at a glance. You don't have to stare at them, and you don't have to grok them. It's a way of simplifying forms, and means that you can read them in a flash. You don't have to kind of stare really hard. And then the other thing I find is, let's just talk about readability. Readability, we have several ways in which we can, get readability. One of them is through silhouette. So I can use the wonderful filled stroke tool, which is just another tool which I absolutely love in TV Paint, and I haven't seen in other programs except for maybe what was it? Not Absinthe. Shoot, I can't remember it. Anyway, yeah, it's not Absinthe. I'm trying to remember the name of that tool. Alchemy. Yeah, Alchemy has this tool which you can use to drag out, these shapes. TVP Animation Pro has this wonderful tool, and if I right-click, I can just create holes, so I can add and subtract very, very easily. So for inking, this is fantastic because I can easily use it to quickly chop away areas that I don't want. I can just chop and cut. So this is a really, really nice tool. It's the freeform shape or freehand shape tool, and Let me zoom in on it. It's this tool right there. That's the one. Okay, so anyway, yeah, it's a freehand shape tool, and I find this is really, really useful for inking, useful for cleanup, getting rid of stuff really quickly, and yeah. So I was talking about silhouette, right? Because with silhouettes, you could, I can very quickly bang out a character. There we are. That's one side, and then there's the other side. And then I can just keep adding. And then I can even subtract as well. So if I just subtract the whole face here, right, and then I can add again. Right, so this is the power of silhouette, is that, you can really, 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 bang things out really quickly. They're instantly readable. And, need I say more? It's kind of not something that words can really describe. It's just, you see it, it works, it looks great. So inking is very important for being able to enhance the silhouette of an object. You are going to, really make it so that when you look at the edge of things, there's the outer silhouette. The outer silhouette would be this. Hang on, let me get a bigger brush. Okay, so the outer silhouette would be this shape that you're seeing out here. This is the outer silhouette right here, right? But even then, there are inner silhouettes as well. The inner silhouette would be, and inner silhouettes would be comprised of the other shapes that are, within this large mass. So inner silhouettes, this is an inner silhouette right here. That's another inner silhouette. If I want, I could, change that. I can add, other silhouettes to this and start. Let's change that outer silhouette right there. Right, so you see how this works now, right? All of these things, they're just, the only difference between an inner silhouette and an outer silhouette is it's just not on the, main outside. It's still the same technique. It's just applied on a different shape that is not within, it's not on the boundaries of the main mass. But even then, there's a silhouette inside, right? That kind of makes up that form. So this is, now we're getting readability within, on the smaller level, on the smaller forms within the large form, the large overall form. So silhouetting, very, very important. Another thing is the line weight. People talk a lot about things like thick and thin. When you're inking, you are not just tracing. You're doing another level of drawing. This is an opportunity to add additional information, depth information, silhouette information. You're not just tracing. If you just trace, then I don't know. You're inking, but I can't. I don't know. I think it's a missed opportunity if you just trace over the lines and just make things darker. For instance, how you control your line is really, really important. Your line weight. So if I draw something with consistent line weight like this, it's just it's just an ellipse. Okay. If on the other hand I increase my line weight and I decrease my line weight, right? So what I'm doing is I am now, increasing the thickness of various areas, right? So what I'm doing is I'm making it appear as if there's depth information, right? And there's parts of this which are getting closer and parts of this which are getting further. So this is another very crucial part of inking, is that lines are no longer just lines. They have depth information. They can get closer. Right? We need to be able to get these lines to come closer, and they go away, and they come closer, and they go away, right? So lines are not just flat shapes, all right? This is just a dumb flat shape. But if I do something like this, okay, now you can see how instantly we get the feeling that this, right, is coming closer. This is now, coming up like this. And same thing, likewise, right, we get the feeling that that is coming closer, right? Even here, we get the feeling that this is coming closer, right? Now, I could probably, let's see, on all the convexes, I've kind of gone and thrown in, heavy line. So what happens if I try to do the same thing, except this time I'll go heavy on this. Now I'll go lighter. Oh, yeah, kind of hard to do this with the Wacom tablet. So I'll try and go lighter on that line. And you know what? I'm not even going to worry about doing clean lines. Screw that. We don't even need clean lines. I'm just going to kind of hatch it in, and you'll see how it works out. All right, so that's a thinner line. And maybe I'll make this one get even thinner. So I'll go from thick to thin. And then I'll get thicker and thicker and thicker as we go outwards. So, I mean, when you're penciling, you know, you can do this. You can break up your line when you're penciling. Don't worry about the smoothness. Don't worry about the lines being broken up and being ugly. Who gives a crap? Doesn't matter. Because you're going to go over it and ink it anyways. The important thing is that right now you have this opportunity to throw in depth information, so you might as well do it now. And don't let, you know, the smooth line. I find that if you're trying to get that perfect smooth line, it's the fastest way to kill a drawing, kill the life out of the drawing, and just lose the point of the drawing altogether. You know, so there we are. I've made it so that the line here is much thicker and heavier. We really feel how close this is. Down here, I've thinned that line out, and now it feels like it's thinning, and it feels like it's going away. It's becoming distant. Right, so I'm going to just pare that line down. And that's the other thing, is that with the tools in TV Paint, with being able to just right-click and erase something very, you know, I don't have to switch between tools. I'm not spending time going back and forth between tool bins. I just right-click and I can erase things. So it makes it into a fantastic inking tool. And you know, yes, you can use programs like Illustrator. You could use programs like Flash, you know, and get fantastic vector results, which allow for tons of scaling and are fantastic for you know, print stuff. But TV Paint, I can just work at print res anyways, and you know, I'm already at print res. And you know, the other thing I find about vector stuff is that the more that you paint, or rather, the more that you draw, the more vector points that you wind up adding, more Bezier points you get. And the software will begin to slow down because it has to render all that stuff real time. It's all nonlinear and non-destructive and procedural. And so the more details you throw into in a you know, in a vector-based drawing, the harder the system has to work to render it all out. Whereas in TV Paint, it doesn't matter how much detail and how many little fine lines you have, it will always be fast. So case in point, you know, it's like I can do ridiculously like fine detailed stuff, you know, in TV Paint. And I don't have to worry about it looking, hang on, here we are. Let's bring up, I'll just go to my gallery for a second. Oh, you know what? I think the internet is just kind of slow here. I'll just pull it up. I have the actual file right here. Here we go. Projects, go to portfolio. Yeah, here we go. Oh, not that directory. Here we go, yeah. So stuff like this, let me drag over to TV Paint. Okay, so I can really get down into the dirty details. No, it's not inked, but the theory of inking is still here. The way in which I handle the thick and thins, you know, a lot of things, the way that I eliminate detail, the way that I use like thicker lines, you know, on things, on the silhouettes of objects, that all kind of plays into this. And the thing is, I can get into ridiculous details, and it's still fast. It's still fast. You know, TV Paint just does not care. You know how much. You know, even though I've got all that detail, this image is 1331 by 1543, and that was after I cropped it. So it's still 20. It was painted at 2560 by 1600, and it was completely done digitally. This is not a pencil drawing. It's not a fountain pen drawing. It is. It's done completely digitally using my fountain pen. Digital brush, which I created for TV Paint, and it's available on the forums. So anyway, yeah, let's talk a little bit more about the actual inking and not about, you know, my past work. So in this case here, I'll just clear this up and show you, you know, let's get practicing inking. So here, you can make a doodle, okay, because here's the thing about doodles, that doodles have no readability whatsoever, or they start with little to no readability. And so I'm just kind of going around and blobbing things up. All right, so this is my doodle, right? Looks like a pile of poop. And now, as an inker, you have to make sense of this nonsense. So get yourself a nice brush, you know, something with thick and thin on it, and don't worry at all about line quality. The purpose of this exercise is not to establish nice line quality. That's what the exercises of learning your hand-to-eye coordination are for. The purpose of this exercise is to make sense out of nonsense, because if you are working with a penciler, he's going to generate a lot of squiggly lines and crazy stuff, and you're going to have to be able to make his stuff read better. You have to make his work good and readable. So we've got all this blibbity blibbity blob stuff, and now I'm going to begin carving, right? I can do that. Now that is one whole lobe of form which I've created. I can go over and I can carve that out, and now I kind of had to find a way to maybe, let's see, you know, and take your time. It's not a rush, all right? It's not a race. It's not a rush. You really want to be able to treat it like chess, all right? You need to strategize, because every line really counts when you're, well, you're going to learn how to make every line count when you're inking. Now, remember how I was talking about line weight, right? All of these have very similar line weight. So I think I want to make this object here come in front. So to do that, I'm going to double it up, right? Double it up. Don't worry about line quality. That happens last. Knowing how to accentuate form with this particular technique with these particular techniques and ways of thinking that I'm showing you, that comes first. Afterwards, you know, the line quality comes last. Here's another thing about line weight. With line weight, if I have an object like this and I were to render it out like a, that's a good example. Here. Yeah, let's take that. Okay. So I'm going to just throw down a flat color like one of these. And then I'm going to brighten it up. And then I'll just brighten it up some more. Okay, so I have this kind of object here. And let's get back to my inking brush. And let's make it thicker. Okay, so you'll notice that the lighting is concentrating. You know, if I look at the lighting from a three-dimensional sense, this is where the lighting is going towards. It's pointing out of the surface like that. So in this case, with a circle, all the sides are exactly the same distance away. With a sphere, with the sphere, all the distance, all the outer perimeter is going to be the same distance away, so you can't really use depth to control line weight. But what the other thing you can do is you can use lighting, right? You can use lighting to control line weight. And I'm going to do this in two pieces. I don't care. Just what my hand wants. It's just, yeah. Then I'll turn it, right? Another thing I love about TV Paint is that you can turn your canvas and not worry about the, you don't have to have a GPU. It's entirely CPU-based drawing. So if you have, you know, I'm just using a $500 computer, which I bought recently. It was a media PC. It's got like a Core i3 dual core. It's not a god box. It's not the most brilliant computer in the world, but you know what? It handles TV Paint absolutely wonderfully. It's fast. Okay, so that's what I'm saying is that with the lighting, right, up in this corner, there's more light. Right down here in the bottom, there's more shadow. So wherever the shadow tends to build up and bunch up, that's where I throw in my my line weights. That makes it more thick, you know, thick down there. So in this case, that's something else you can do, is that I would go through this thing, and I'm going to trim away, right? So line weight can be additive and subtractive. And also, you know, to trim things, we've got this wonderful tool here, right? That's the, what do you call it? The freehand shape tool. So I can use the freehand shape tool as a way of adding and subtracting and, you know, thickening and just controlling the line weight of the stroke after the fact. So, you know, same deal. I'm going to just bring up my, my inking brush. And I'm going to pick that up. Right. So this is very abstract. It's abstract form, but we're trying to give it, you know, a concrete readability. Okay. Now, you have to zoom out frequently when you're doing inking. A lot of people who do inking, they spend all their time zoomed in, and so they get their lines, they get the ink lines to go right on top of wherever they want, and as a result, you know, they lose the sense of the whole picture, and that's no good. Because inking is something, when you're trying to get readability of an object as a whole, you got to work out, you know, out at 100%, or in my case, I'm working at 50% because I'm working at double my monitor res. Right, and so I'm going to get maximized. I'm going to maximize my line weight on this object here because it's coming closer. This line weight here must be thicker than this line weight, which must be thicker than that line weight, right? You got to look at the distance ordering and use that to control the weight of your lines, right? We talk about things like value scales, right, where we look at objects which are, dark and they get brighter and brighter and brighter. On an overall scale, you do the same with line weight. Line weight has a line weight scale. Okay, so now we can really feel how it comes closer. I can make this really come out. And then same deal, I'm going to double line it, double it up. Right? So this is, what I feel is kind of important when I'm inking, is I'm always trying to carve out forms, make sense out of the nonsense, enhance readability, and and just I actually, those are pretty much the only reasons why I deal with inking. And I guess maybe it makes it look clean. It makes it look clean, makes it look pretty. It cleans it up. And of course, you do all this on a separate layer. I am lazy and I'm doing everything on one layer. Okay, what else can I talk to you about inking? Show you with inking. Yeah, here, let me just quickly, instead of doing abstract blobs, let's quickly just throw up a character. So, abstract is character face. And I'm doing the same pretty much scribbling. And okay, so we'll just do a bust of the character. Just really, really keep it simple. I don't want to spend too much time. Okay. Good. I'm not inking right now. This is still what I would consider as, penciling, because I got the rough framework with the doodle blob. But it is by no means, kind of. Actually, that's another thing. I don't really make too much of a distinction between when I'm inking and penciling. I guess in the comic book industry, they say you're either an inker or a penciler, but I don't know. I got to do both. I can't give my work to another inker and kind of trust them to do it well. And yeah, you'll probably notice that I work a lot on the on one layer. Go figure. I think in the past the reason why we had things like inking was because it was very hard to photocopy or print this stuff out. And so inking was kind of this extra step, to deal with a technological limitation where pencils would not print out very well. And so now we have inking, but inking in itself, I feel is kind of an art form. It's another form of art. It adds, a lot of stylization to it. Okay, so let's say I'm going to ink this guy up, or this gal up, and I think it's pretty much close enough. And let me get to something much thicker. I'm just simply thickening my brush up. There we are. We've got a thick and thin brush. That's all it is. And maybe what I'll do is I'll just, yeah, okay, that's fine. Oh, and I got to turn drying off. Okay, good. So that way I can draw lines and then I can cut them back like that. So, all right, so let's go around the perimeter first. I'm going to just do the perimeter, and I'm not really thickening that line all that much because I kind of want to mess with it somewhat. Is it going to be perfect? No, there's going to be a lot of flaws in it. This is, again, one of the reasons why you would typically work on a separate layer. But I don't, because I'm a boss. Like a boss. Right, so you see how I've just reduced this to just a few lines, right? There's like that one outer one. There's that big one there. There's the face. I'm just nailing this down to just the rudimentary biggest objects. And then maybe go up this way. And then I'll cut it off using the drawing tool. Okay, so number one, when you're kind of inking, and I think one eye looks a lot larger than the other, so I'm going to have to, let's regain some symmetry in that. And maybe what I'll do is I'll just set up my size so I can foot pedal control it. Okay, good. Now I'm using the foot pedal to control the brush size. One of the advantages of being a programmer is that, you know, as an artist, you can make your own tools. And if you're wondering where to learn how to program, well, I would suggest make video games. Make video games. You know, get something like Game Maker Studio, or or better yet, make video game modifications. Get something like get good old Quake. Quake was like one of the easiest to make modifications for, and you know, just practice mashing a few numbers, changing a few numbers around. So, okay, there we go. Yeah, there we go. Now the eye looks a lot more. Bang, bang, bang. Put a really thick line. Sorry, I've kind of gone silent because inking actually takes a lot of concentration, which is another important thing. You know what? I'm going to just black them out completely. Good. Now that I blacked it out, I can kind of see, you know what, maybe I'll change the shape of the eye, right? So, and this is, again, one of the reasons why I work on one layer is because I can just blast over previous lines. You know, being afraid and trying to keep all your previous lines, I find, holds you back. You know, you can't really do repairs and fix things up. You shouldn't be beholden to your old lines. And then I think maybe I can sneak a little bit of white in there. The white of the eyeball right there. And then I guess I can trim that down. You know, for people who are I have been asked many times whether or not I'm willing to sell my my driver hacks. And the reason I say no is because I'm an artist. I'm not. I mean, I program to get things done. And just if I were to sell it to you, well, there's a couple of things. Number one, it is a hack. It is still just a hack. It is, you know, the fact that it works at all is a miracle. And every time I set it up on a friend's computer, it takes me, you know, several hours. It takes me like 2 hours. I can't do that for everybody. There's, you know, hundreds of people who would probably love to use these things, but it's just, I couldn't possibly set it up for all of them. It's not a universal setup. People are willing to pay for a universal driver, but like I say, I got the tools. I'm happy with the way that they're working. They work well for me. And I don't want to, you know, make a living off of, you know, making these tools, which are essentially an extension of, well, Wacom's drivers. I think if anything, you know, they should be the ones to, you know, improve these things. I have talked with them. I went to an expo recently and I spoke with them. They are interested in what I do, but I have to see kind of where this goes from there, right? I'm willing to help them out, give them algorithms for whatever I do, explain, you know, the methodologies, the things. You know, I'm willing to help them out, but it's up to them to, you know, kind of take the next step and, you know, to implement this stuff. So all I can say is they've expressed interest in it, and then, you know, time will tell. Time will tell, and you know, hopefully, you know, I think the ideal situation is not for me to sell these drivers and make a lot of money, but rather see that, you know, help facilitate Wacom, you know, implementing these things into their actual drivers, and then everybody gets it, right? Everybody on Macintosh and, PC, and if they have Linux drivers, great. That's what I want, right? I don't want people to have to download and pay for a separate hack. I would prefer to see it and just supported at the driver level, from the original developer, because they can do this stuff better than I can, and they have the necessary support resources to help people out with the technical support end of things. So anyway, I'm just carving out these big silhouettes as I work, and now things are are pretty much resolved. There's not a whole lot left that I need to add in terms of inking. I mean, it's already, I've done everything I've set out to do. I've enhanced the readability of this thing. I guess, if I really want to stylize the inking on this, one of the things I do a lot with my, say, fashion drawings is I do this. I do accentuation of the shapes. So for this task, I need to use, I need to use my shape cutter, my freehand fill tool. And to do that, you have to look at the inner shape. This is the white negative space inner shape. And all I'm doing is an accentuation of that. Oops. I went a little too far. So in this case, I'm going to trim this down. Let's see. Maybe I can, actually, since it's the outer edge, I'm going to keep it thick. In fact, I think what I'll do is I'm going to just do that. Okay, make that massive. That part there is massive now. Go for a massive outer line because it's the silhouette line. And you see, I like to add it in pieces. Oops, I'm going to trim that away. That's better. And then same deal here. I'm going to just cut it down so we get the tendency. Okay. You just, turn on, if you're using Paint Tool side, turn on that smoothing, and just really, really. Now here's another thing, right? I was talking about that negative space in here, right? So what you got to do is you got to accentuate. Bang. Accentuate that negative space, right? So I'm really blowing that up like crazy. This means that you got to look at things like the convexes and concaves of the shape. So in this case, we see a convex right here. So I'm going to, there, right? This is the concave, so I'm going to carve into it like that. Then we see the point here, and that's another thing. Rotate your canvas to match the movement of your hand, right? So rotate your canvas like this. The other thing I find is that with tablets, you have a sweet spot. This, not just a sweet spot, I'd say a sweet arc. This is the arc, the sweet arc that I have. So what I would do is I'm going to rotate this to match the sweet arc right there, because it's a sweet arc. This is the only sweet arc that I can draw. So I rotate everything and I zoom things so that they fit that arc. It is the arc that I can create anatomically because it's based on the arrangement of my joints and my limbs and all that stuff. And it is, it allows me the greatest control. Right? In this case over here, right? This is, now you have to see, look at this area here, right? This area here, this is now the negative space. So that means that your line is going to push in over there. Right? So you got to work bidirectionally. See that? Now over here, right? This is, look at this curve going up, right? If anything, this line as it goes up, here, let me get a different tool. Okay, you can see, look at the angle at which that's going. You can see how this is misaligned with that. So I'm going to start on the outside and pull back. This is what I do when I'm correcting alignments. I start on the outside and pull back into the main shape. Then I can chop off the guide that I've created. And then I can even go into this and I can slice into it. So you see how much you can really like work. You can really work that. Also here, right? This area right here. You see that? If we zoom right in, we can see this is that space, and it's carving right in like that. So I'm going to just see what that does. And then over here, we can see there's kind of this a bit of a bonk, right? You can tell there's an angle. It's not that steep, but you can feel it here, right? So that's a problem, right? So I'm going to go in there, I'll cut that away, and then there. I'm using the sweet arc there. I've sized it to match the sweet arc. Because it's not just a spot, it's a whole arc. All right, so match things up to your sweet arc to make sweet arcs. What else? Right, I can see right here the outside of this, the inside of that. Let's match them up. There. And you'll notice that a lot of times, like every time I finish a line, I always jump back out. I jump back out so I can get an overall view, and I'm like, how do I want to adjust it? I'm looking at this line here. Whoops. I'm looking at this line here and finding it's kind of thin. It's a little too thin. This is nice and thick. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to accentuate down here, right? I'm going to pull that. I want this line here. I want these two lines to really kind of, I don't know what I'm trying to explain. It's like this becomes this, right? I'm trying to get this kind of an aesthetic. So the same thing can be said for here, right? You've got these two kind of lines that they're zapping into each other. And same thing with out here, right? I'm trying to get that same. That's good. So everywhere there's a concave, I got to look for that. So I mean, yeah, it's bitmap based. It's not vector based. And yeah, you don't get the same control, say, with like, all the Bezier points that you're pushing and pulling. But look at this, man. I am right into the pixels, and I'm slicing. I am just. This stuff takes time. This stuff is like a mega time sink. You can spend, hours. You can spend a whole day doing this stuff, and it's fun. I actually enjoy it. Because every time I do one of these brushstrokes, I'm like, oh man, it looks better. It's like I've improved it. That area looks good. That's why I do it. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't ink if I just looked at it as being this terrible, laborious, and horrible, experience. Using TV Paint and having hack drivers to smooth out my lines, or using something like, say, Paint Tool Psi, makes it fun. Makes it into a fun activity. It's nice when you don't have to fight against your tools. And also doing things like your exercises to make sure that your arm can do exactly what you want, getting used to the sweet arc, those kinds of things. Those also, like I say, you're always having to remove the obstacles to you having fun and doing a good job. So, you have to train your body, train your mind, and prepare your equipment so that you can so that these obstacles to your enjoyment of the process is not at all, obstructed. Because, and I say it must be enjoyable, because if you want to turn this into a career, and even if it's a hobby, I mean, come on, hobbies got to be enjoyable as well, right? So if you want to be doing this as a hobby for a career, you got to do what you got to do to make it as fun as possible, so you can do as much as you can, so that you can get the experience of doing it a lot. And the experience will make you better. You'll get comfortable with the process of inking. There we are. I'm just, again, look at this. I'm looking at the these two little arrows, right? I'm trying to carve those into a nice little. Whoops. So I'll look back here, and maybe I'll start my point over here, and I'll chop out, and then I'll carve in. Right. So you look at that as it's a graphical symbol that I'm now applying. It's like a motif that I'm applying to all my work now, right? So look at how when I do that. All right, let's get back to here. right? You see how much the outer line is really, really, really like just it, it's so visible. Right, so I carve that. Let's see, what else can we do? You know, right here where it's kind of concave, then what I'll do is I'll pull the line in instead. There. Yeah. And then maybe over here as well. Oops, I kind of messed up. That's the only problem, is that if you do a figure eight, right, that's what'll happen if you do figure eights. Try to avoid, it's like Ghostbusters, don't cross the streams. You don't want to do that. Okay. So over here, you know, it's kind of devolved into a giant blob. So, you know, here I am. I'm using not so much the line tool, but I'm not using like a regular brush tool, but I like using the shape cutter tool, you know, for the really, really, really big chunky stuff. I use brushes when I need thinner lines, though, simply because to do a thin line with, you know, a tool like this, you have to really, and it's not conducive to doing thin lines. This is why using something like an inking brush like this, right, with thick and thin on the pressure, you know, is much more conducive to making that kind of line work. So choose the right tool for the job. I really have just two tools that I use for inking, and you know, that's all there really is to it. It's the rest of it is just really the same thing applied over and over again once you understand, and it's actually quite, you know, simple. Like, yes, there are many layers to what I do, but, you know, that is it. Well, that's all I know. That is all I know. Maybe there's more, right? Maybe we could, I think nothing retards artistic progress or progress in general is the idea that one thing is the best way to do it. So, I mean, it's always important, you know, even though I've shown you stuff, you know, to understand that it hopefully, you know, that that there's more, you know, maybe there's more, maybe there's more we can do with inking. Certainly, you know, I haven't been inking for very long, not as long as some comic book artists have been, but you know, these are kind of the techniques which I generally, you know, use when I'm working. Right. So anyway, far from done, but you know, you can kind of see how it's well on its way, and if we just keep on going at this, you know, it'll eventually get done. So I'm going to just do this last line, and then I'll stop the video. Yeah, okay, good enough.